Hello everyone, and welcome to Or This. This is my video reflection on the scriptures and theme in the sermon from this past weekend. And today I'm reflecting upon the Sunday, which was January 23rd, the third Sunday after Epiphany. Our scriptures were from Jonah, very small section of Jonah, but should really read the whole. It's only 3 or 4 chapters. You should reading the whole story of Jonah. But the scripture was Jonah 3 verses 1 through 5 and verse 10. And the gospel was from Mark chapter 1 verses 14 through 20. And I encourage you to read those unless you're watching this and you heard them in worship. But there were these two, I would call them taglines, that caught my attention, which I preached on. And they were, and I mentioned them in the sermon and definitely ended with them. Those were when Jesus says the time is fulfilled, and when Jesus says to Andrew and Simon, "Follow me and I will make you fish for people." And I preached on that during the sermon, but I'm going to talk in a little bit different direction. And what I want to mention in going in this direction is I'm currently listening to the audiobook by Philip Yancey called Vanishing Grace. And obviously you can read it in a hard copy too. But he talks a lot about the ways, and he's kind of talking to evangelicals. He must be an evangelical, I guess. And so, because he uses them as examples over and over again. So I think he was speaking to an evangelical audience. And he's lamenting the ways in which Christians seem to not be exemplifying the grace of God that we receive in our lives, and that we are meant to exemplify to draw people into God's grace here in the world. And he gives a lot of good examples of grace that make me certainly kind of rethink my own approaches to things and my own interactions, and then my own failures to live the way that he is describing, being gracious towards others, doing something for others without expecting anything in return, or even though they've done nothing for us, for me. And so I thought about this in relationship to my 2 taglines from the gospel: the time is fulfilled. The time being fulfilled, the time is, I talked about what time is it in my sermon, but it is a time when God's grace was infused into the world. And that began when Jesus came into the world, but it is ongoing. It continues throughout today. And then the other tagline, "Follow me and I will make you fish for people." Jesus infuses God's grace into the world through himself, but then he passes it along to others, and then gives others the mission to allow that grace to come out of through their lives, so that other people can be drawn, can be reeled into God's grace and love. And I thought that was those are really important points to think about, because there's a lot of awfulness going on today. Some of it is because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there's a lot of hardship that is coming as a result of that, and as a result of the protocols that have to be put in place to keep people safe. For that matter, there has been a lot of strife and struggle throughout the pandemic to help people understand about being gracious during a pandemic, and being respectful of other people around us, because spreading the virus doesn't just is contagious. So the only way the virus is spread is when people gather together and interact and share their aerosols and all that kind of thing. And there was a lack of grace happening throughout this pandemic, really, in understanding that our actions can impact the health of others. Therefore, we have to do certain things to hold back so that we don't make others sick. Things like wearing masks and physical distancing and that kind of thing. And there was a lack of grace, at least. That was the lack of grace was certainly very publicly available for us to see, and so the pandemic has been very difficult for a lot of people, partly because of the illness itself, partly because of the protocols, and partly because of just the lack of grace that our society has had with each other and caring for each other. There's a lot going on, with politically as well, a lot of division going on between us. So this idea of the time being fulfilled, and that time being to remember that God's grace has been infused into this world and into our lives, and is meant then to be shared with others. This is really important for us right now. When there's a lack of grace going on, it is the Christians, it is Jesus' disciples who have to remember that calling, have to remember what time is it. It is the time of God's grace among us. Where are we called to? We're called to fish for people, to cast out that grace by just trying to understand one another, by protecting one another health-wise, and realizing that the health of other people might be more important right now than certain things that we want to be doing. Now we're all getting weary of that, and I understand. I understand that, but we continue to do things to protect the most vulnerable in our society and to protect others, because we know how important that is, because we care about the lives of those around us. And so this grace, we live out this grace by caring for those around us. We live out this grace by trying to understand one another, especially in those areas where we differ in what we believe, or we differ in how we understand things, or how we differ in our how we were raised, and therefore we differ in how we understand the world. And grace allows us to be able to try to understand one another. Grace also allows us to care for one another regardless of our differences, and that could be any kinds of differences. Grace allows us to care for people even if another person has done something to get themselves dig themselves into a hole. But grace allows us to try to find ways to help people along in their journeys when they've fallen into a hole, or when they've gone off on another path. That's what grace is. Grace is doing and caring for without expecting that somebody earned it, or expecting that anybody's going to repay it. So the time is fulfilled. God's grace is here. God has given it to us for the times that we have gone astray. And so Jesus says to us, now follow me and I will make you fish for people. And that grace is meant to be cast out in our lives, so that others might be drawn into this and recognize what this time is. Recognize that God's grace is alive among us now. So those are some of my thoughts on this weekend. Please feel free to share yours, either in the comments on Facebook, or if you have I think you have to actually have a YouTube account in order to make comments on YouTube. But please feel free to comment and tell me what you think. So God bless you all, and thanks for watching.